friends, and welcome back to part 2 of our 2023 Fringe Review Roundup series. I am your ginger host, Mackenzie, and also your co-artistic producer. And tonight, once again, I am joined by fellow co-artistic producer, Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. How are you doing?
Oh, I just finished a whirlwind week of Fringe. I mean, you did it for 2 weeks. I've done it for one, and I'm already like, okay, I'm good.
Yes.
Cannot fit any more into my brain at this point. So there's that. So no,
good. This is where we unload it all out of your brain, and then you can promptly forget them if you want.
Although there definitely are some shows that have left a lasting impact on me for sure that I'm very happy will stick around, and I hope have lives beyond Fringe as well, because some of the shows I saw were utterly amazing. So we'll definitely have a good time talking about them. And if you haven't watched part 1, check it out, because Ryan saw an additional 15, 18 shows in that first pack of reviews. So, if we didn't talk about your show here, check part 1. Ryan probably brought it up there because he saw what, like 30 plus shows now?
Between the two of us, I think we saw 30 shows. So,
yeah.
There were 100 shows at Fringe this year. So if we didn't talk about your show in part 1 or now part 2, then apologies. We did not get to see your show, but we hope you had a good time and, sold lots of tickets and
And I mean,
people.
If you want, reach out to us, because we're always happy to do artist interviews, things like that. So if you're someone who really wants to get on the cup, reach out to us. The link will be in the video below, and you can absolutely send us your information, and either myself or Ryan or Jill will happily get in contact with you, and we'll figure out what we can do with you. So there you go on that front. But Ryan, I see you're wearing another non-plaid shirt tonight. So what is your ensemble, and what is in your cup tonight?
So I guess my ensemble, I wore my flamingo shirt last time, largely because that was what I was wearing rushing back here to record after just seeing Fringe shows. So today I wore a different bird-like shirt because I guess Fringe is avian for some reason. But yes, I have like little parakeets on this shirt.
Cute.
And I have my Tip the Fringe button, because remember,
Very
folks, that 100% of ticket proceeds go to the artist. So if you want Fringe to survive, you gotta tip the Fringe. And I see you have your button too.
I did. I donated on the last day, as I like to do. I always give money on the last outing of my stint.
Oh, you got to do it at the beginning, and then they don't bug you to tip after because they see you have the button.
I will tip at the end.
Okay.
You have to earn that tip.
Oh, wow. Also, what's in
Kidding.
my cup?
They all earned it very well.
Well, once again, I just have my bottle of water as my cup. No need for a hot beverage when I'm probably going to run out of air talking about all of these shows. So stay hydrated, folks. How about you?
Yes. Well, tonight I am also rocking an animal printed shirt. I'm wearing my lobster shirt.
Nice.
Tonight in honor of my summer lobster tan that I get. So there you go. And tonight I have, as usual, my glass of Crystal Light for myself to sip on. But Ryan, you and I shared 3 shows this year. Unlike last year where we all saw separate shows, this year we actually have 3 shows in common. So we'll use those shows as kind of benchmark holders as we discuss our lots of shows. Yes, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's cool that we did see 3 shows in common, because I mentioned this, I think, when we did our 100th episode, that part of what I love about our form of criticism is that it's dialogue based, and we really get to dive deep and bounce off each other and not just say, I am the critic and here is my opinion about the show, and have to take my word for it because I'm the only one talking. So while we want to cast a very wide net with Fringe and see as many things as possible and cover as many things across our small but mighty team, I think it is fun that we will get to have some dialogue about at least a few of these shows.
Yes. Exactly. And I mean, Ryan, why don't we kick this off with our first shared show? Okay, it was my first show in the Fringe, and actually I just seen it right before we recorded part 1 last week. So it was a fresh show, but we left it to our shared episode here. So our first show we're discussing is Dead End by Great Untold Stories Inc. And I gotta say, first off, they gave us a program. And oh my goodness, do I ever appreciate a good program.
Trees be damned.
Trees be damned. Or even then, like some shows like All That Remains that we'll discuss, they gave me this with a little QR code in the back that said I could scan there for my program. Doing something like this or like this goes a long way for your audiences. Couldn't tell you how many times I came out of a show and I heard somebody in the audience going, So who was that actor? I want to know more about them. Or like who wrote that show? It was very good. So your audiences want to get to know your shows more. So if you can find ways to do QR codes or things like that to help audiences connect with you, it's a good thing. Good marketing. Anyway, Ryan, Dead End, presented by Great Untold Stories. Ryan, give us a classic Graham Borochovitz summary and what your thoughts were on this show.
Oh, okay. Dead End it was written by Michael Posner, directed by, I believe, Brian Nasimok is how that's pronounced.
That's right.
Apologies if it's not. And starring Julian Ford as Lawson, Kara Hunter as Lil, and Chris Gibbs as Kevin. Oh man, I loved this one. Not gonna lie, I thought this was a grand old time.
Yeah.
So our basic setup is that Lawson is a real estate agent who is showing a house kind of out remote from the main city center to a couple, Lil and Kevin, and he's showing them around, and it is British. All the actors are, I believe, putting on accents. I'm not sure if it felt very put on, but in like a very kind of funny, whimsical farce sort of way. But yes, it's set somewhere in England, and so we're in this real estate situation. And as this conversation unfolds, we find out that Lawson's wife has mysteriously vanished, and he's come back into work. He still has to do his job. It's helping him keep his mind off of it. But as he's showing the house to this couple, the husband, Kevin, seems to think that something's up with this real estate agent, and every time that his wife Lil goes into a different room, Kevin kind of interrogates Lawson about like, what's really going on here? You mean to say this about your wife? Doesn't it seem a little suspicious, etc., etc.? Yeah. And as the conversations unfold, we learn more little details about this mystery situation. We learn how
Lawson has an adopted son
who is maybe entangled in the mystery. This is one that I think is really strong and well written, and I don't necessarily want to spoil the big twists, although as we mentioned in the previous episode, that spoilers they're not off limits, I guess. But when we do spoil something big, we'll try to address that. But yeah, this is essentially a kind of murder mystery in a very unconventional sense, that there isn't an obvious detective character. We kind of think Kevin is taking that role because he has this confrontational bad cop sort of attitude. Yeah. But there's something quite right with him too. And Lil seems very naive to everything that's going on. And then maybe she knows more than she's letting on. And it's just a Russian nesting doll of twists upon twists upon twists. Yes. And it was great. The actors were so funny. All three of them nailed their roles and nailed multiple roles, even though they all play only one character. The ways that certain masks come off and we learn things about them. The switches that happen in the characters are very well done. I don't know, it's just a little under a week since I saw it, and I've still been thinking about it. I feel like some of the twists kind of don't necessarily work, or they undercut other things that happened earlier. And I feel like watching it a second time, knowing about the twists would completely fall apart, because you're like, well, how does that make sense? Kind of like a Now You See Me, like the Magician movie twist.
Yes. Or even The Dark Knight, I find. If you go back and rewatch The Dark Knight after seeing it the first time, you're left pondering a lot of things going, how did this work again?
Yeah. So
what's the plot here?
But like at the end of the day, the show doesn't take itself too seriously, and neither should we in this regard. Like, I think, yeah, it's fun that we have all these twists. It's fun the way things get spun on their heads, even if they don't all make mathematical sense. But I loved it. I thought this was a very strong show. What were your thoughts?
So this was my first show of the festival. So it was a great show to kick off with. I definitely say the mystery is good. It's not the expected mystery. No. Because you go in thinking they're going to find a body in a closet, but then it turns out that's not the case, and the mystery is more about this missing wife and kind of the spin out from that. So you're left kind of wondering who's who in the situation. The director and the writer very clearly say it's based off kind of like a Sherlock Holmesian style bottle episode based mystery. So it is a slow burn. I want to give audiences fair heads up on that one, where compared to another murder mystery show that I saw I saw two. Actually, I saw three murder mystery shows.
Wow, this was the Murder Mystery Fringe Festival for you.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, this one was definitely the slowest burning one, where you're left kind of going, okay, where are we building to? Like, because I'd say the last third really picks up steam.
things get
And
wild in the last third of this.
yes, which is where I
Yeah.
really got activated and really got invested in what was happening. The first bit where it's a lot of just Kevin and Landon.
Awesome.
Lawson, thank you, Lawson. Like they're again, they're back and forth. I felt there was a few too many of those kind of one-to-one scenes where I was like, okay, where are we going with this? What are we building to? And then when you finally get the twist, the first big twist of the show, which will not spoil, but once that first big twist falls and the masks start to, shift a bit, you go, okay, now we're getting into stuff. Now we're cooking. Okay. But I'd say definitely the first half was a little bit on the where are we going? And then the last third really picked up steam and drove to the end, is the way I would describe it. So I definitely just say go in expecting a bit of a slow burn, but it's really good. The mystery is very well written. It's one of those things where you only can watch it once without knowing what's going to happen. And so once you know what's going to happen, then it's like, okay. I mean, it'd be interesting to go back and rewatch it now, knowing the twist, to see how well did the writer plant seeds ahead of time.
And I have the feeling that he didn't really, and not because just for like a lack of planting, but when you actually think about what the final twist is, there's no way that the second and third twists work in relation to that. And if you've seen it, you can probably surmise what I mean by that.
Yes.
So but I think this show works best as just this like raw gut punch of wow. And I will also say I knew very little about this one going in. It wasn't actually on my initial list. I only wound up seeing it because when we made our request for the comp, that they said, oh, can you use that comp just for one of the late night shows? Because they were thankfully selling very decently for the earlier shows.
When I saw it.
Yeah, so you purchased your own ticket for an earlier show, and I wound up taking the comp for that 10:15 evening show. So, and I was quite surprised, and surprise is the operative word. It might start as a bit of a slow burn, but it does burn very bright.
It does. Agreed. All right, let's get to the next one, though.
All right.
Called Fatal Charade by El Kabong Theater Projects.
Your guess is as good as mine. El Kabong,
right.
Sure. Yeah, so Fatal Charade. This is written by Jack Rennie and Andrew Cameron. It's directed by Jack Rennie, and it stars a rather large cast. Andrew Cameron himself is in the cast, alongside Eva Petrus, Nels, Brandon Rush, Sean Jacklin, and Leon Quinn. Apologies if I'm pronouncing anybody's name wrong, and I hope and Varun Guru, of course, as one of our lead characters. You had a very large cast in this one by Fringe standards. So this is a play that's set in ancient Rome during the Augustan period, and the title Fatal Charade refers to, I don't believe it was a term that was actually used in ancient Rome or has translated from the Latin. I think it's a term that has been retroactively coined by historians to refer to a practice that was common in this period of ancient Rome when convicted convicts or very supposedly bad people would be executed on stage in the middle of a dramatic performance. So they would basically be, you're arrested, you're put into the cast of this theater troupe in the role of a character who will be killed during the plot, and they will actually do your execution as part of the show. So both the convicted person and the character will be killed simultaneously. So our principal character in this regard is named Knox, played by Varun Guru. And we don't find out precisely what he did to find himself in this situation, but he has been condemned to die via a fatal charade. And we have our, I guess, ostensible protagonist, Nerva, played by Eva Petrus, who is the director-producer of this theater troupe. And she, in order to get funding for her shows, she needs to pitch them as fatal charades. She can't just get the money to do or approval to do a play for art's sake, that it has to be something in the service of the state. So she commissions her old friend Virgil, as in the poet of the Aeneid, Virgil, who I believe historically was not a playwright, or certainly not known for being a playwright, but whatever, we're taking a lot of liberties with the history here.
Yeah.
Virgil is the emperor's favorite playwright, so she kind of ropes him into writing a brand new play to be done for this fatal charade. And they got this fun troupe of actors together, and they all have interesting personalities and problems and character dynamics. And ultimately, the thrust of the story is that they all become very enamored with the condemned man Knox, who is part of their cast. He's playing the role of Achilles in this Tragedy of Hector show that they're doing. And they don't want to kill him by the end of this process after they've all become such good chums making this art together. And the main drama of especially the third act is, are they going to go through with it? Or is there a way that they can skirt around it? And yeah, so overall, that's the basic pitch for this piece. It's very strong, very well done. It was, it kind of, it doesn't even feel like a Fringe show in a way that I think sometimes you see plays during Fringe that are kind of very well written, sort of a little on the longer end. If I have like one mild critique of this, it's that maybe there's some of the scenes in the middle where especially when they're in the middle of their rehearsal process, where it maybe, goes a little longer a bit, or you feel like maybe that scene could have been cut or shortened. But I think those are critiques I have only because I was seeing it in the context of Fringe, where it's like the fourth show that I saw in the day, and you expect shows to kind of move at a clippier pace. This one takes its time. It really is a character ensemble piece where it's building all the roles of all the actors and the troupe. And they all, for the most part, they all have a character arc, all their own. And it's very interesting. I think maybe the one of the main characters who doesn't have an arc is Cassia, the ingenue character played by Emma Nels, who we actually saw as Sister James in Doubt last year.
Great production.
Yeah, so she's maybe the one character who doesn't have an arc, but she's still very functional in the story because she's kind of like a Superman or a Paddington, where her function in the story is to make the people around her better, more so than her needing to change herself. And one of the, I guess, most interesting characters is the guard who is tasked with supervising the production to make sure that no funny business happens with this prisoner, played by Leon Kin. And he seems like just like a prop tree number 3 type character at first, but he goes through the most interesting arc and has some of the funniest moments. I think, again, I feel like I'm very positive about this piece, yet because I loved it so much, some of like the critiques are coming out. Something that I maybe didn't love about it so much, and this is really just a personal gripe, but I'm the one talking, so I feel like I can say it, is that I don't love when plays about theater set in historical periods frame naturalistic acting as the be-all and end-all of what good acting is. That I would have the same critique for a show like Red Velvet by Lolita Chakrabarty that was just at Crows last year, that plays that think that, oh, we have, unnatural, otherworldly acting that's so foreign to our sensibilities today because the characters are historical in nature. And then you have somebody like, in this case, Knox, our condemned man, come in and he's just like, just act like a normal person, guys. And they're all like, whoa, this is so groundbreaking. And like, I don't know, like, again, I'm not making this as a critique from historical accuracy of like, it should be more accurate to what acting was like in ancient Rome. But for me, it's kind of a feeling of treating a very specific form of acting that was kind of birthed in a confluence of late 19th century Russian styles and early 20th century American styles and saying, this is the teleological endpoint of what all acting was building towards. And I don't know how I really feel about that conceptually, but that's such a minor gripe and it's really just a me gripe. But overall, fantastic cast, really well-written script, and just like a fun little tidbit of history that I think they really found a compelling way to tell a funny yet heartfelt story about. So if they do revive this anywhere, I really do encourage people to check this out. It's a very strong piece.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you liked it because it was on both our lists and it was one you really wanted to see. So I said, all right, you go. I got this.
Okay. But if it does come back, you should check it out.
I will most certainly do that. All right. So the next one is mine. And it is All That Remains by the Hobby Horse Theater Co. And so it's this one here. Hello. And so basically, this is a drama, and it centers around the fallout after the shooting in a gay LGBTQIA plus nightclub. And basically, this is set in kind of like a group therapy morgue area. And basically, there's a woman at the desk who is working the desk, and she has one set of ashes remaining, and is for a individual named, I'm pretty sure it was Stephanie. And so this man comes in and she says, we have the remains of your child, Stephanie. I'm pretty sure his name's Stephanie. Anyway, Stephanie, we'll go Stephanie. Sorry, apologies to the playwright team. But anyway, so the person says, no, not my child. They go through the paperwork and you go, no, this is your address. And so ultimately you find out Stephanie was transgender and that her dead name was Gabriel. And this is their father, who they've had a falling out with, who's been called to come pick up the remains. And obviously, this play, how do I put this? It basically is tracking the journey of grief. So you start off with anger and denial, and then you basically build up toward acceptance. And in the meantime, you're also having these somewhat political, ideological conversations, because you obviously have someone who is a right-wing individual who is not overly supportive of the LGBTQIA plus community, and you have this woman who you ultimately find out, slight spoilers here, that you ultimately find out that her daughter was one of the people who was killed in the nightclub shooting, even though her daughter was not gay, queer, whatever. She was just friends with people and ultimately got caught up in this and died. And turns out was friends of the daughter of this gentleman. Anyway, so basically they go back and forth with this conversation, and it was a very good conversation to have. I definitely feel this show can be expanded. I feel, because there's 9 stages of grief, right? If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure.
I thought it was 5, but I could be wrong.
5, 9, I can't remember.
The Kubler-Ross model is 5, but maybe they've expanded some since.
Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. Like anger, denial, bargaining, something.
Well, the 5 are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, but I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah, so
maybe they've added some
exactly,
since.
Yeah, so we didn't get depression or denial. We just got we got anger, bargaining, acceptance. So basically, I'm like, I think this show would benefit a little bit more from expanding it out a bit more, just to kind of make these conversations feel a little bit less generic's not the right word, but kind of like it feels like the conversations we always hear with, my God says that LGBTQ people don't exist, that they should be, burned at the stake, blah blah blah. Like you fall into a bit of that area where it's like the classic tropes, and then as the show progresses, you get a little bit more 3-dimension, but by the time you get to 3-dimension at the end, I was like, okay, I want a little bit more. I want some more here. Like, there's such a good story here that I'm like, you could expand this out to 90 minutes and make this into a 80, 90-minute show and make it really good. Like, just tack on another 10, 20 minutes to this piece, and you can make the story even more full and stronger. Because the story is so heartbreaking. And by the end, the father, on some level, comes to accept their child and says their chosen name. But, it's one of those things where I would have loved a little bit more time just to really pace out that journey a little bit more, because it felt like a very fast anger of, this is not my child, I don't accept this child, to by the end they're crying, saying the child's name. So I would have loved maybe a few more paces in there to really smooth the whole journey out, because it really is a beautiful journey, and it's a journey that I hope more people in life can take, because when you first meet this father character, you don't like him because he is, I don't identify with his politics socially on that level of not accepting, not loving, that type of thing there. And that's something where it's really hard to kind of then start identifying with him so quickly without it feeling like a rushed evolution. You know what I mean, Ryan?
Yeah, it's because that sounds like a really impressive setup for a play, that you have 2 different types of grief happening upon each other. My child is literally dead, and also I didn't know that they, identified in this queer way, and
they did, and the father kicked them out.
Okay, well, that's even adding an additional layer to it. This kind of reminds me of a conversation we were having of a similar nature in our review of Things I Know to Be True, Rubbish Production, which, I said in that episode that I didn't really love the way that particular plot point was handled in this regard, and, it sounds like while we come to a form of acceptance, which is what I felt was lacking in that production, maybe the fact that it is an hour-long Fringe show doesn't give the breathing room that you'd hope for to really flesh that out.
Bingo. That's exactly it. Yeah. The concept's really good, and I would even encourage the writer, I assume they have, but maybe I would say dig deeper and try and interview some of these people who identify this way to get some more authentic, verbatim kind of verbiage versus just feeling like kind of like the classic stereotypical ways we hear people like that who identify talk. Like, maybe try and find a little bit more there, because the character's fascinating. As someone who, and I really applaud the writer, because if you got to cut, and the writer, I will say, is Josh Downing, is the playwright. And I mean, to have one of your main characters of this two-hander be someone who is so diametrically opposed to what their audience is going to like, and then to have them change views, which is what you want the world to do. You want to come together in grief. You don't want to be separated in grief. So I just say there, like, it's a fascinating premise and setup. I would just say, go more with this. Like, this piece could do so much good in the world. Explore it further, develop it further. You've got something really good here.
And hopefully they do, and maybe they even already did and had to cut it down to this size for Fringe. Sure. That's always a possibility too.
We had that at Playground at York, where you had this really good show and it had to be chopped down to like 15 minutes.
Yeah, those were the days.
Those were the days. All right, Ryan, let's get to the next one, which is another one of yours, which is Curious K explores the Paleozoic?
Paleozoic, yeah, which is
Paleozoic.
The geological period in which life first started to emerge on land in this world. Yeah. Cards on the table. I guess I front-loaded a lot of the ones that I really loved. I love this one.
Okay.
It's one of the two Kids Fest or possibly Teen Fest shows that I saw this year. I reviewed one of them in the previous episode. And there weren't a lot of kids in the audience, mind you, but like that's okay, because I think this show is just as much for everybody as it is than just for kids specifically. So the book, music, and lyrics are written by Kenton Blythe. It was directed by Chantel Ford, choreographed by Lise Cormier. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it was starring Brianna Love, Jada Rifkin, and Kenton Blythe himself as the titular Curious K. So the setup for this is that we have two friends, Emma and Olivia, who are, I believe they're supposed to be like teenagers. They're on a field trip to, I think they explicitly did say that it was the ROM, but it's just some kind of natural history museum is what you need to know. And they have to do a project after this field trip where they pick an exhibit that they felt was the most interesting, and they have to summarize everything they learned from it. And what we learn right away about these two is that one of them, I believe Emma, was the one who is the, very, I will do the whole project and you can just slack off. And Olivia, is often undermined, doesn't feel like she's living up to her potential, and especially due to the way that this friendship has shaped up in all of their school assignments since they were little kids, she really feels like her best friend doesn't appreciate her and doesn't think that she's smart and can live up to her potential. So right off the bat, we have this very, interesting character dynamic that's set up. And then they're in this back room of the museum where they uncover a robot mannequin type character played by a real living flesh and blood human on stage, but it's supposed to be a robot for the sake of the plot, named Curious K. And this seems to be an aborted museum exhibit where he looks like something right out of a 90s vision of what a cool internet kid looks like. He's wearing like a tie-dye blazer, and he's all silver, and he's holding a guitar, and he's basically a robot that you push buttons on him, and he plays songs about the Paleozoic era. And he was relegated to this back room. He's clearly not part of the main exhibit, but all of the songs seem functional. So Olivia finds that this is like the coolest thing she's seen in the whole museum, and she pushes the button and he plays these fun songs about all the different eras or the different periods of the Paleozoic era. And, the songs are all bops. They're they explore different music genres throughout them.
They're bopping.
They're bopping. Brianna and Jada do like this really well choreographed, I guess foreground dancing is the word. They're not in the background. They're kind of like dancing in the front of the stage while Curious K is playing all these cool boppy songs.
What?
And yeah, it's just a fun time. And like, it starts off very much that like, okay, it's sort of in the same vein as something like Schoolhouse Rock or Peabody and Sherman, where we can learn more through song than just stuffy exhibit museums pouring information upon you. But then something happens where Curious K basically becomes sentient and has a somewhat of an existential crisis, and also complete access to the internet. So we got a lot of things going on in here. We have just fun educational songs about the Paleozoic era. We have this fractured friendship dynamic between our two main characters, and then we have robot existential crisis piled on top of all of that. And
it's a lot to fit into one show.
It's a lot to fit into one show, and it balanced it all perfectly, in my opinion. Like, you know, was some of the humor juvenile, of course, but, you know, it's for kids and teens primarily. Yes. But like at the end of the day, when near the end, this might just be me. I don't imagine this was the temperature of everybody in the room. This certainly isn't a Pixar movie by any stretch, but I had like actual like misty tears welling up in my eyes by the end of this. And I can't imagine that's something that they expected there to happen to their audience, but I think this is just such a sweet show. It was adorable. The relationships were just so compelling. I've kind of been there before in kind of both sides of that friendship at different sides of my life, parts of my life, which is interesting. And yeah, and Curious K is just this fun schoolhouse rock meets, you know, Mr. Peabody guide through, you know, dealing with his own kind of mysterious what is my life, but also fun Paleozoic songs, while also helping these two friends come together and actually learn something. So overall, like, yeah, this is just a remarkable piece. I'm really glad I saw it. I think it's probably one that a lot of people maybe passed over because they're like, kids show. I don't know if I want to see that. And it was maybe just like a little too mature in a way for it to be something that you'd think, oh, this is one I definitely want to take my kids to if you are somebody going to Fringe with your children.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, yeah, I loved it. And I was a dinosaur kid growing up. Now, the Paleozoic era precedes the dinosaurs. It's a lot of that life thing.
Look at you.
So you know, the title grabbed my attention, and I actually did learn stuff about the Paleozoic era. So, you know, educational and heartwarming. What more do you want? Look at you.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. All right. Back to me with one that Ryan actually spotted on the Fringe website and said, why aren't you going to this, Mac? This seems like something to be right up your alley. And I said, what is it, Ryan? He goes, Exorcist and Operetta by I&E Productions. And I said, I never saw this. And it's because it's, Ryan, what did you call it? A BYOB?
No. So they used to call these BYOVs, bring your own venue. I think the term they now use is unconventional venue. It basically just means that the artists didn't win the Fringe lottery, but if they provide their own venue, they're still able to participate.
Yes. And so, yeah, so the show wasn't listed on the list of all the other musicals. It was listed on its own venue page, separate, that she kind of had to scroll through to find. But thank goodness Ryan found this, because this piece was delightful, I have to say. And it wasn't what I was expecting. I went in expecting a very serious, dramatic, dark musical, because obviously The Exorcist is that story, you know. We got masturbating with crucifixes. We got spitting bile, crawling backwards down the stairs. And I was like, how on earth is a Fringe show going to have the budget to do this show? Probably, are they going to do like a puppet once we get to like the demon possessed child? And then like that's how they're going to kind of do this. I was like, how are they going to do this? I was very intrigued. And when you show up to this venue, it was this house on T campus. It's like this music conservatory home. And it looks like this kind of New England, East Coastian manor house. And I was like, oh, perfect. We're doing almost like a site-specific walk around the house style event. But you get inside, no, it's a refurbished home that's been repurposed into this kind of music studio. So it was just a grand piano and a microphone. And basically I was like, okay, all right. So we're not getting a walk around in the space. What else are we going to get? And I glanced through the Fringe page when I booked my tickets. I was like, okay, I know it's Exorcist. I know it's going to be an
the
operetta.
Title alone pretty much sells this one. You don't need to read the rest.
Yeah, exactly. So here I was thinking, okay, it's going to be a piano player and probably like a cast of 4 or 5 people, because you got the 2 priests, you got the boyfriend, the mom, and the
Exorcist-y.
The Exorcist-y daughter.
Reagan, I believe her name was.
Reagan, yes, it's Reagan.
Yeah.
Reagan's the
it's been a while, but yes.
So, but it was just one man. It was the composer and author of this piece, Eli Pasek, who performed the whole show solo. And it's just him with the piano and a microphone. And basically, this guy is like a Mel Brooks, where he knows style of operetta so well that he can parody it and knock the format in a very wholesome way that he admires this format, but at the same time he is someone who can kind of take the jab at it in a very intellectual way. It's not just, haha, look at that, we're singing opera. So he's narrating this whole piece, and he goes, because this is a operetta, it has to be lighter in tone. So we're going to change some things in the story to make it a bit brighter. So, for example, just how in the film it opens with, I think it's Father Karras, or the other priest is the one that is in Egypt on the Egyptian dig, and they find the demon. And he goes, yeah, that's too dark for an opening. Skip that. So it opens with the townspeople all singing about an exorcism. If you need one, it's at this house. That kind of thing there. It's kind of like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, where you have all these villagers all coming out singing about their day in this town in Washington Heights, basically. It's great. So they have that. And then, of course, they've aged up the daughter. So instead of the mom having the boyfriend, it's now the daughter has this boyfriend who's 18, she's 16. And even though they've only known each other for 5 hours, she wants a proposal of marriage to this. But at the same time, she's also been playing with the Ouija board. And the ghost keeps reciting the lines of when the moon hits your eye, that's amore. Yeah, that's the only thing the ghost keeps saying to her. And so basically, she's playing with the Ouija board, and also gets possessed. The mother is about to start rehearsals for this big Broadway production where it's all about a woman who falls in love with the priest who's having questions in life. And Father Karras, unlike in the film where he is having a crisis of faith, this is just an actor who says he is a priest when he is not a priest because, he wanted to pay, and his agent said, don't, kind of like, no matter what you do, I get 10%. So he took the job as the priest, faking because the director's like, I want method. I want a real priest to be the priest in this. We're not realizing the guy is not a priest who is reading out of a book of Christian theology for dummies, basically. So ultimately, it follows the same type of trajectory plot. Reagan pees on the floor. She's spitting bile. The mom has a great moment where she's going to all these doctors, and they kind of have and all the doctors have this kind of HMS Pinafore, Modern Major General style song where they're all recommending different drugs, especially Ritalin, to her. And basically it all spirals out. Ultimately, in the end, the one priest does not die when the demon is exorcised. Basically, they purge the demon by singing That's Amore all together. It's great. So it definitely took a more comedic tone to the story. And because it was just one man at a piano, it worked. Because if you were to actually have a full cast and, have puppets and things like that to kind of animate what was happening, it'd be too dark. But because it's one man at a piano who is doing the demon's voice and the mother's voice and all the type of stuff, and he's playing and singing himself, it's brilliant. And I would love to see this somehow mounted in full, to find a way to do it in full, because I would love to see this with a full 30-person cast where you can play up all the villagers and the Hollywood producers and the doctors, just have this full big sound, because the songs are so catchy and wonderful.
It sounds like
so
a big
funny.
Part of the charm is that it was just one man at a piano, though. Do you think something would be lost if they had a larger orchestra or a full cast of some kind?
No, because I think once again you play into the comedy of the situation of it's an operetta, because it says an operetta at the bottom, and because the poster is very cartoony with the priest and Reagan waltzing together in their exorcist form. I think you can sell it as a bit on, and the fact that it is a twist on it, where it's people come in expecting the dark scariness, but really it's, not. I think that could be a fun selling point for this. So I loved it to see it, even if it was still done in concert style with more actors singing and still having the composer playing the piano and describing what's going on. I think that could because I just want to hear the songs how he hears them with a full cast, because it's such a good concept that I'm I want to see more of this. And I left wonderfully humming away about an exorcism. So it was great. It was a good find, Ryan. Nice. I was very happy.
Okay, well, I am glad one of us got to see it. I would have probably also liked to see it too. I'm a fan of Eli's work. I actually shouted out this in last year's Fringe Roundup, even though it wasn't in last year's Fringe Festival, but I once saw this farce that he wrote called False Claims. And it was just such a memorably funny show. So I'm glad that he's still making things that they're still great. That I'm sorry I missed it, but hopefully they do it again, either, alone or with the full orchestra and full cast that you're describing. Because
it'd be great.
Sounds great.
But yeah, wonderful. Okay. Next we have another one of yours, Ryan. Amor De Cosmos, a delusional musical by Joe Clark Productions.
Yeah. So I deliberately put this after Exorcist because it's another solo musical piece. So I thought that felt thematically coherent to put it right after.
Yep.
Okay, so the book is by Richard Kelly Kemick. The score and lyrics are by Lindsay Walker. It is directed by Cody Porter and starring Anton Gillis Adelman as the titular Amor De Cosmos, who was born under the name William Alexander Smith, and he is best known as being the second Premier of British Columbia, which is a title that he took in 1872. So this is interesting, this one. I don't know how I feel. I left it kind of feeling like I definitely enjoyed it. I want to preface all of this with that, but it was weird. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it was definitely different. Like I knew it was a solo musical. So, I guess our basic plot is that we have young William Alexander Smith, born in Nova Scotia, travels all around North America. He goes from Nova Scotia to, I believe, Salt Lake City to Anaheim, ultimately arriving in Victoria, British Columbia. He goes through various odd jobs and journeys along all that way. He starts out as a photographer. He becomes a pioneering journalist and ultimately gets into politics and enters the race to become the Premier of British Columbia, which he loses the first time around, or even maybe a couple times around, but then ultimately wins to become the second Premier. It's right off the bat, I'll say that the book was quite convoluted and very verbose in a way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a lot of part of the charm and where they're trying to get a lot of the comedy out of this situation. But I feel like it was also expecting its audience to know some of this history, as if it's not teaching us this for the first time. And maybe, I don't actually know the touring history of this piece. Maybe it began in BC, where this figure is of more local fame. But I was learning about a lot of this history for the first time, and it goes at a breakneck speed, mile a minute, characters talking in very long-winded and verbose ways that made it very difficult to follow. Okay, what exactly is happening? Who is that? Who is that person? Again, they're all played by one actor. And, how is this related? And now he switched to a Scottish accent, a very thick Scottish accent to play this other character. What's going on? Overall, I don't think the story was as complicated as these trappings made it feel. I do think I got a sense by the end of everything. But it was, maybe you need to be on something going in to get the full experience or to be able to vibe with it entirely. But at the end of the day, I think the real strongest part of this is our performer, Anton himself. He is indeed a triple threat. He maybe didn't get to show off all three of his threats as much, but because there wasn't a lot of dancing in this, but there was one tap dance scene, and man, the man can tap dance. So yeah, he did an excellent job. He played multiple characters, multiple voices. He chewed on this very convoluted script and sang beautifully in all of the musical interludes. So yeah, I think I have mixed feelings about the production as a whole, but it was a very strong performance. And if you're going to see a solo musical, you hope that the performer is able to, pull the weight of that. And I think, overall, the acting is what people will be writing home about this. And I do think this is going on tour as well, so I don't necessarily want to say more about the plot. The fact that the subtitle is a delusional musical, and this doesn't feel like a big spoiler because it was in their marketing, is that ultimately Amor De Cosmos does get diagnosed as clinically mad, and that becomes a big part of the third act of this. But I think a lot of we're supposed to then retroactively see a lot of the strangeness as he's an unreliable narrator telling this story in this way, but I don't know if that kind of tracks as a through line throughout all of it. But yeah, overall, very strong performance in an interesting, if kind of strange piece.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, unless you have follow-up questions, I'm comfortable.
No, I mean, like, I'm just a fan of Canadian history. So,
yeah, so am
I would absolutely check this show out if I'd known this was a historical show kind of based around this second premier of British Columbia. I definitely would have, checked it out as one of those things. But definitely sounds like
it is. I think it's actually, I have their little thing that met Anton in line at another show, which is how this even got on my radar. And they are going to go to Hamilton Fringe after this. So if you're able to make it to Hamilton, I guess next month, check it out.
I will see what I can do. Because, I love all things history. So I'm always down for a good historical show that always kind of piques my interest. So I will definitely have to check that one out. All right, Ryan, it's another one of yours on the docket, which is Pyramid by Millerdale Productions.
Okay, so Pyramid is written and directed by Katie Miller and Steve John Dale. Katie Miller has been in the past regular in some of our early panels here on the Cup, and she and Steve were both interviewed last year when they brought their previous musical Flash to the Calgary Fringe Festival.
That's right.
Which, in the nature of full disclosure, Jill, the other member of our Golden Trio here at Cup of Hemlock, was in that production and in Calgary, but she wasn't in this one. So Pyramid,
she's busy up north.
Yes, she's doing shows elsewhere. But Pyramid it stars Katie herself as one of our two characters, Riley, and Lauren Mayer as the other character, Jen. And the pitch for this piece is that it's a bit of a concept musical about two unlikely friends who are brought together by virtue of the fact that Jen is a representative of some kind of Arbonne-esque multi-level marketing, cosmetics sales scheme. And she has essentially recruited Riley to use her home as a base for having a party to sell some of these items.
Like a Tupperware party.
Like a Tupperware party, or like any of these like Arbonne or Avon or these type products in these
All
MLMs.
I'm picturing is a pyramid from The Office with Saber.
Yes.
The Saber pyramid.
Yes, exactly like that. No, not quite like that. But yeah, the title does connote the fact that these are essentially pyramid schemes. These companies, everybody knows this, these multi-level marketing. And if you are lucky enough to not get suckered into one, you're better off for it. But yeah,
my friend got almost suckered me and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, we've all received messages from somebody who you haven't talked to since like high school, being like, I have a great opportunity for you. And
this is first year university.
Okay, whatever. Whenever. So basically, I think they're maybe mismarketing this show a little bit, is what I'll say, because they use words like multi-level marketing and scheme and pyramid scheme all throughout it. And at the end of the day, I don't really feel like the show is actually about MLMs. It's basically using MLMs as just a pretext to get these two characters in a room together. That one of them is the sales rep who's using the home of the other to have the Tupperware-esque party with the hopes of recruiting Riley into the ranks. But it's really just about these two characters who find themselves at a crossroads in life and don't really know. One of them has just dropped out of university or is thinking of dropping out of university. The other feels like she's in a rut because nothing in her life has worked out and she's under very high expectations by her overachieving family. So the fact that she's had some success in this MLM is something that she's able to hang her hat onto as finally something's working for me. But is it though? And yeah, like the show never quite seems to interrogate what these MLMs are or what is destructive about them. It's really
how they prey on people's vulnerabilities.
Well, that's the thing. The little blurb in like all the fringe literature kind of made it sound like that it was going to be MLM the musical, basically. And it really was just, in my opinion, using MLMs as just a pretext to get these characters in a room together and kind of turn these unlikely friends into actual friends over the course of it. The big joke at the end is that nobody came to this party, or that's like the inciting incident, that nobody's come to this party, which Riley sees as, well, of course, I don't have any friends, so why would anybody come to my pyramid scheme party? But the big punchline at the end is, well, you sent it just as like a Facebook invite. Of course, nobody came. Nobody's on Facebook anymore. Haha. But yeah, like I think there was a lot of interesting stuff in the pitch that could have been explored, but I don't think that's the story they really wanted to tell, which is maybe a shame that that's what the marketing seemed to emphasize so much. What I will say, compared to the show Flash that I didn't get to see in Calgary, but they had a live stream at Calgary Fringe, so I did get to watch it. This show has a lot more book scenes, whereas that
Okay.
one basically starts with the book scene and then kind of enters this dream space where it's just musical music, like from beginning to end. This one is much more kind of conventional musical of a plot line interspersed with songs. And the songs were really good. I think that is the big strong suit of the story more than anything. And the two performers were excellent. And Steve himself, the co-author, was on stage playing guitar along with it, just a one-man orchestra.
Okay.
And yeah, it was all just like acoustic, folksy songs, were very, very good, very well written, and very well performed. My favorite song was called It, and that was basically like popular from Wicked, and right down to the fact that is the Glinda and Elphaba character dynamic between these two, right down to the fact that one of them is wearing pink and the other is wearing black. And, you know, it felt a bit on the nose, but I love Popular and I loved It. It was a good song that really did evoke all those same feelings for me.
Popular. Lar.
Yes, it had that exactly that kind of dynamic. So yeah, like I think this was like a fun, small scale Fringe musical. The characters go through interesting journeys, make interesting discoveries. But if you're going to call it Pyramid and really emphasize the MLM element of it all, I would have liked to see a little more criticism or deconstruction of what that is beyond just a setting. Yeah, that's my main critique. But otherwise, it was a good time.
Okay. Love it. Love it. All right. Back to me with a show that is my second murder mystery show of my 7 that I did. And this one is Things We Lost in the Fire by Promise Productions. And it was directed by Dion Denton and actually also starred Dion Denton as one of the lead characters, Miss Effie. And basically this is all set in a apartment building, inner city apartment building, where you have all these different families, and basically it's all about their lives, but it's told in flashback, flash forward, because we have a fire in the building, it burns the building down, and basically you have this interrogator going and asking people, how did the fire start? And there was a body found in the building. And so everybody flashes forward, flashes back what was happening leading up to the fire. You have one couple who is like high school sweethearts who moved into the city, who are having marital issues, both kind of cheating on each other. You got Miss Effie, who runs the building, who's a single woman. You have another couple. Well, he's a police officer. She's kind of staying home looking after the kids. She's a little bit of really focused on the kids and kind of, I don't want to say neglecting, or kind of not prioritizing her husband. Let's put it that way. And he's feeling the strain of that. And then you got the last appearing, and they are a couple who are in an abusive marriage. They have a daughter who likes to go visit Miss Effie after school. And so basically it's all about their lives intermingling. And ultimately it's all about figuring out what happened to lead up to the fire, and how you may live with people, but you don't actually know these people. Because we find out later they all have little nicknames for each other. Like for example, the cop's nickname is Furman, as in Mark Furman. The best thing is there is a child who's where the cat who asks who is Mark Furman, and I had to laugh because, oh my goodness, I can't believe that is a dated reference now. But basically, like, his whole storyline focuses around that he mistakenly shoots a BIPOC teenager who the neighbors think is breaking into a condominium apartment building. Turns out he's not. He just forgot his key. His mom was out, and the guy panicked and shot. And the child is now in a coma. And so he's dealing with the fallout from that. And that's just one of the many plot points leading up to this fire. And then ultimately it's all about you find out, or there's a few plausible suggestions of who started the fire. And ultimately it's all about how to, like, does the community rally together and, do the right thing and cover this up? Or is it one of those things where they're going to push somebody under the bus for their own skin? And it's all about how we've lost that community who look out for each other. It's the fact that all the neighbors can hear the abuse going on with this one couple, but do nothing about it because they all go, well, it's not our place to mix in. When it's like, actually, yeah, it kind of is. If you hear, abuse happening, it's not the time to sit quietly and do nothing. Like, that's the time when you got to step up and do something for your fellow neighbor, if you can. And so it's all about that. And I thought the ensemble was really strong in this. Like they all interacted really well with each other. And I gotta say, Dion Denton as Miss Effie stole the show out of this cast. Her comedic timing in this story is so good. The fact that she also directed the piece and also was one of the main players was terrific. And she really, I mean, the whole cast was terrific, but she was really a standout. I got to give a special shout out to her because just her interrogation scenes alone is great. So it's really well done. It was a really wholesome story that I would say really had a beautiful message in it and left you kind of going, okay, all right, yeah. Because I mean, I live in a condo. I've met my neighbors in the hallway. Do I remember their names and all that type of stuff? No, I don't. Maybe I should. You know, like I recently we had a fire alarm go off late last week and at 2:00 in the morning, and like a whole bunch of us left the building because we followed the rule and evacuated the building. Turns out it was just a false alarm and it was all good. Thank God. Knock on wood. But it's one of those things of, you meet everybody outside and you go, oh yeah, I recognize you from, being like in the elevator, but do I know your name? No.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things of we've lost that as a society. We've lost that close knitness, that like inner personal dynamic. Like I remember growing up as a kid in the suburbs in Barrie, like I knew all my neighbors who were across the road. We had Bob, and I forget his wife's name, but they were across the road. They had a pool. We had Joyce, who
you don't need to name all of your neighbors from your street in Barrie. I get the point. But,
yes, but one of those things of, like we'd have community garage sales. Like all the dads would be out on a Saturday afternoon cutting their lawns. All the kids would play together. Nowadays, you don't see a lot of that. It's a bit of a lost.
Well, it's also, I guess, the alienation of an urban setting versus a suburban setting, I think is probably a lot of the difference where there's a lot of
But even then, like you would think in a condo where you're so close to one another, you would do like a floor potluck, things like that. Maybe I should start that.
Yeah, only you would.
Only I would. I don't know. I could see Jill getting in on like a community potluck.
Jill, we don't live in your building.
I know. I'm saying in your building.
Oh, okay, fine, yes.
But
why would we get in on your floor potluck? I'm confused.
Either way. So yeah, I mean, like, I was thinking a really good message and it left me thinking, going, I should get to know my neighbors better.
Well, there you go. It's nice when theater actually inspires you to take action and live your life differently because of it.
Exactly.
Isn't that what we want out of our art sometimes?
Exactly. And so, yeah, it was a really beautiful piece. And I definitely came up pleasantly surprised by it. And I figured out why I knew the title, because there is a movie called Things You Lose in the Fire, what's his name? Benicio del Toro is in that movie, along with Halle Berry, I'm pretty sure. Okay. And it's a very good, very heart-wrenching movie. You watch it once, you're like, okay, I never need to watch that again. But it's really good, though. But I was like, why does that title sound so familiar? Now I know. There we go. It was very good, though. So, yes, Things You Lose in the Fire. Things We Lost in the Fire. So that is that. All right, Ryan, you have the next one. It is June, which is Uriah's granddaughter company.
Yeah. So I didn't realize, because I didn't know a lot about Things We Lost in the Fire, that this was thematically linked also in a way, because, well, more loose cosmetic connections than anything deeply thematic, but it involves, I guess, I'm trying to even think, spousal abuse, or I guess is a comparison here, and gunshots are fired.
Okay.
But in a very different way from that one. Okay, so this is written and directed by Gillian R. Edwards, and it was starring a good 4-person cast. Titular June is played by Jessie McQueen. So she is a woman who is awaiting trial and eventually is convicted or is found guilty for murdering her lover. Sorry, I said spousal abuse before. I don't believe they were married in the plot. And her lover his name is Richard. He's played by Jacob Click. And the main thrust of the plot is the friendship that she forms with this female prison guard, Parker, her name is, and she's played by Bonnie Anderson. And as June gets closer to Parker and tells her about her life and the circumstances that wound up in there, there's a lot of flashback sequences to her relationships to 2 of the key men in her life. One of them is the lover Richard, who was abusive and who she murdered. And the other is her best friend Jeff, who's played by Daniel Christian Jones. And he has very good Bill Pullman energy, like, boy next door type friend.
It's sounding a bit like fried green tomatoes.
Not quite, but I can see why. But while there is lesbianism in this, it's not between our principal characters. Parker, the prison guard, is just an out lesbian. I'll say, I forgot to mention that it's set in the early 50s.
Another fried green tomatoes reference.
I forgot to mention it because it really doesn't feel like the 50s. It's written it is not written in what I would call anything resembling period dialect.
There's no greasers. There's no pink ladies.
It's definitely not Grease, but like maybe some of the costume choices kind of evoke it. Like
no poodle skirts.
I have the program here, and it does say it's 1958, and I probably would have guessed it's the 60s if I hadn't read that, simply by virtue of like early 60s too, but late 50s works. Until there's like a line, like maybe like 15, 20 minutes into the show, where they talk about Marilyn Monroe in the present tense.
Right.
That was the moment that tipped me off of, we're dealing with like 60s, maybe even 50s. But it was written in a way, like there's a lot just in the writing that I thought was kind of like characters just casually curse. Like they drop a lot of F-bombs and in ways that people talk like today, but it really didn't feel, it felt very anachronistic for the period, to the point where I didn't even register right away that it was supposed to be set in this period, the way that they spoke. But yeah, essentially the main plot is it's about June developing this friendship with Parker, the prison guard, and them learning about each other, and her having these flashbacks about the men in her life. Mm-hmm. And the cast was all good. I think I'm a little lukewarm on this one, and I think sadly the writing is where a lot of that is for me. Now, I do get the sense that this probably was a longer play that got shortened for Fringe. It just really has that feel to it, and maybe I would enjoy a longer version of it a lot better. But I also, if that was indeed the case, then I get the sense that I don't know if they made the best use of some of the things that were chosen to be kept. Like there's a whole scene close to the end where June and Parker do a Proust questionnaire together in the cell, and that, we've already learned plenty about these characters, and you'd think doing a basically, highbrow glorified personality test like Myers-Briggs, we're supposed to learn something new about these characters through dramatizing the process of them doing this personality test together. It's basically just a glorified BuzzFeed quiz at this point. You can put Marcel Proust's name in it all you want. That doesn't make it classy. Right. But I don't feel like we learn anything new about these characters by having them do this questionnaire together. So why have this scene, especially if other things maybe did get cut? Like, I think there was just lines in that scene that the playwright probably thought were fun and didn't want to lose, so therefore keep the whole scene. But yeah, it just didn't feel like there was a great narrative economy. There's also, like, in the flashback scenes where she, reflects on her relationship to these two men, we have these, like, very interesting, cat and mouse dynamic scenes, and then these are ostensibly June's memories, but then she leaves the scene and we get a monologue from the man character that the scene was in. And well, first of all, she would have no recollection of like his inner thoughts. So is this a flashback sequence or isn't it? Right. And two, more often than not, the monologues weren't telling us anything that we couldn't have surmised just through the scene that we just saw transpire. So there was just a lot of questionable choices in terms of what made it into this, I suspect, shortened version of the play. Okay. And it ended on a very flat note that I think it very much felt was a big triumphant note of just spoilers, I guess. But it ends with June is, tried and found guilty and executed. And it ends with Parker doing a monologue about how, due to her friendship with June, she decided to spend the rest of her life pioneering against capital punishment. And this, so nothing like what happened to June could ever happen to anyone else ever again. And it felt like there was, more, and then it just kind of ended on her making that declaration. And as far as I'm aware, this isn't based on a true story, so it's not even like that last monologue felt like the white text on black screen epilogue at the end of a movie based on a true story about like, this is what happened to the characters after, but it was framed as if this was a triumphant monologue that kind of just doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere. I don't know. I feel like I'm being really down on this one. Overall, like the scenes between the characters were often very well written. I would have maybe liked to see just different prioritization in what the plot chose to showcase. I do think that there's interesting questions being brought up here about the way women in the criminal justice system are treated, especially in this moment in history, but I'm not quite sure if it's anachronistic use of language is trying to make a point about how things aren't that different today, or if it was just a poorly executed attempt at period dialogue. I don't know. This was a bit of a head scratcher for me, but I don't know. That's where I'm at with June. Maybe a week from now I'll have different feelings about it.
All right. Okay. Next, we have our second shared show. One that was, not expected to be a shared show, but then Ryan surprised me saying it wasn't, and it's none other than Mail Ordered by Shanice
Stanislaus, I imagine is how it's pronounced, but I could be wrong.
Stanislaus? But Ryan, summarize. What is this show? Give us a classic Ron Borochovitz kickoff summary.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that I saw this one because I almost didn't. So, okay, Mail Ordered describes itself as an interactive comedy performance.
Okay.
It is written and performed by Shanice Stanislaus, who plays the lead role, I will say, of Lila, and it's directed by Aaron Coates. And it is presented like a solo show at first. Where I also cut me off if it seems like I'm spoiling too much about this because they are going on tour.
Yes. Let's just say there is audience interaction, and the audience is encouraged to highly be interactive in some very surprising ways.
Oh, I really want to spoil it. It's so good. Oh my God, I love this.
Okay, so let's do this then. Let's do this. I'm going to put up a spoiler fringe button.
Sure.
We will put one up now. Both of us are saying we like it a lot. It's going on tour.
Oh my God. If you are in one of the cities where this is, go see it. This was probably the sleeper hit of the Fringe, in my opinion. And I am so glad I got to see this one when I almost didn't.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the spoiler button is up. It will come down once we are done talking spoilers. Because, yes, this is a show that's really hard not to spoil. And so I'm going to go with, I think you really want to talk about the audience plans.
Well, yes. So, okay, so we didn't even really describe what the show is about. So Lila is from an unnamed country. I don't believe they ever say what country she's from.
Somewhere Eastern European, I should say.
Yeah, the actor herself is from Singapore, but they don't specifically specify the country in the show. So she is presenting herself as a mail-order bride, essentially.
Fresh to Canada.
She just showed up in Canada, and if anybody has $100,000 they can buy her and presumably marry her. But her English isn't great, and she frames it as, "Would you like to buy me?" which she begins asking to all of the gentlemen in the audience. Anyone who has $100,000 can buy her. And as the story goes on, and she's, doing these very, very funny, sales pitches where she's showing off her virtues as a wife, her ability to clean, her funny giraffe jokes. The kazoo and the giraffe jokes. Chef kiss. This is so good. So she's, there's a lot of interactive audience participation where she's asking people in the audience, please buy me, and she's riffing off of the things they say. We find out that her dad, had a gambling problem. Lost the family fortune to local gangsters from her village. And that's why, she has been basically sent by some kind of madam to Canada to find someone who will buy her to pay off the family debt. And, if she cannot accumulate those funds, her whole family will probably be killed. We also learned that she has, let's call him ex-boyfriend named Simon, who she thought was going to... Yeah, Simon spelled $$, Iman. Simon is a rapper, and he left her in her village when she thought he was going to marry her because to start his music career. And we hear Simon's song called "You're the Dopest Girl," which you can actually listen to on SoundCloud. They recorded the song and made it available for public consumption. So, okay, remember, the spoiler button is on the screen right now, because now I'm going to get into... Sorry, I can't think about the show without laughing. It's so good. During one kind of particularly over-the-top part of the show, a woman gets up to leave in the audience. And Lila is like, no, don't leave. What are you doing? Why are you like, please, you have to stay and listen to me. And this woman's like, well, honestly,
I don't think this topic's supposed to be joked about.
Yeah, I don't find human trafficking funny.
Which once again, like, go back to our theater etiquette video. I talk about how audiences just got up and left if they weren't feeling it. And so I was actually a bit peeved at this supposed audience member for just getting up and leaving. Because I'm like, hey, well, you already bought the ticket. You're like over 2/3 of the way, and we're down to the last like 30 minutes of this piece. You can't sit for another 30 minutes to like finish the show and just leave in peace. You gotta like disrupt the whole show.
And just based on the fact that we both saw this woman leave, I think gives up the game a little bit.
Yes.
That this isn't
I was gonna ask you, because I was like, because first when I didn't realize she was a plant, I was like, oh, Ryan, at my show, this woman tried to leave. What happened at your show?
Because I arranged for you to get your comp, I wound up paying for my own ticket because I went with a friend who wanted to see this one. But because I arranged for your comp, I had perused their whole press release, and I went in with the foresight that there were 4 credited actors in this. Whereas most people who either didn't read the press release or just skim the material probably just think it's a solo show, 1 actor. Anyone else who's talking is obviously just the audience. So, at first I had the thought that, okay, this person's just leaving and funny improviser Lila is getting her in on the joke. I was buying into that. Well, the second that, the plot kept unfolding with this woman, Andrea Greening, the actor's name is, it went on for just long enough that I'm like, okay, I know there's 3 other actors in this, and you are one of them. So I did go in with that insight. My friend Ben.
I did not.
Yeah, my friend Ben, who was sitting next to me, did not either, and it was a trip watching this with him next to me because like he was losing his mind, and like with good reason too, because this show is amazing. But so this woman Andrea isn't really allowed to leave, and she's basically sort of starts kind of trying to make Lila woke, basically, and wake her up to her situation. And,
it's kind of like the second Borat movie where like...
Which I have not yet seen.
Oh, you haven't seen that one yet?
I haven't seen the second one, no. But sure, you can say the point you're making. Spoiler button.
Spoiler button. Anyway, part of that is the daughter who... She was actually got Oscar nominated for her performance in that film. Ends up going... Like Borat pawns her off on like a babysitter for like a day. But during that time, the babysitter... unbeknownst to Sacha Baron Cohen and this actress, tries to make her, woke and like aware of her situation. And so that kind of spurs off this whole new subplot of her trying to find a job. And like, once again, Sacha Baron Cohen said, well, that wasn't part of our story. That lady just totally brought that element and we just ran with the story. And ultimately they ended up with Rudy Giuliani, which they were not expecting either.
That I heard about.
Yes. So anyway, but basically, this woman just introduced this whole new element to the story that was not even supposed to be there.
Which, I feel like most people had to clue in that this was a plant after like a few minutes of this.
I didn't.
Well, okay, but like just by virtue of the fact that this is somebody who wanted to leave, and not only is she not just like, fuck it, I'm going, but the boldness of this person to like, I am gonna now shape the plot of the second half of this show I wasn't enjoying. Like that takes a lot of...
Oh, see, I just assumed that in the original version, if this person hadn't left, she would have just, done like the, can anybody help me figure out what's going on? And she calls somebody up from the audience and they go, oh, maybe you should date. Go on a date and kind of give these like intellect, like this good advice. But because this woman tried to leave, the actress just went, I got someone now. Let's just fuck with them really good. The actress plays it like that so really.
Oh yeah, like the naturalistic
so well.
The naturalistic acting of our audience plants is so perfect. Now we're running long on this one, but there's 2 other actors we have to shout out. So then Lila goes
Mr.
on.
Nathan.
Mr. Nathan, played by Nathan Crockett, who, again, you're supposed to think is an audience plant because Lila calls out, does anyone want to date me, go on a date with me? And there's like an awkward pause until eventually this guy raises his hand and comes down on stage. And part of me wondered after what would happen if somebody else, very enthusiastic improv guy in the front row, would have been like, me.
Well, Andrea, the woman who tries to leave, she gets tasked with finding a date for Lila.
That didn't seem necessary. Like, Nathan kind of raised his hand pretty early in my showing, so that's interesting.
We had two people, Nathan and this other guy. And he was like, he seems too old, even though he was younger.
Okay, there was no other suitor. Well, but speaking of other suitors, Lila's on a date with Mr. Nathan, who comes in and says, "Get your hands off my girl, it's Simon." So very clearly at this point, even if you genuinely think the other two are plants, you gotta know Simon's an actor at this point.
Yes, I knew Simon was an actor.
Because he comes in a big fur coat and chains, and he's like, "Lila, I came back for you. Yeah. I had to establish my music career." But Simon is just the worst. We hate Simon. And,
okay, good. Your audience hated him too.
Everybody hates. Oh yeah, because there's a Democratic section at the end where we have to vote. Does she go with Simon? And thank God my audience.
Or save the village.
Yeah, or throw Simon in the garbage.
The best thing was at ours, we had a moment where basically it was like somebody on said, "What's the third option?" Like choose for herself, and then the actress who plays Lila was like, "We'll work that into the next show."
Okay. So and that's the thing. I'm not quite sure how she winds up saving her family because
I don't know that either. But either way, it's better than Simon.
Either way, yes. And Simon is played by Dennis Sofian. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Yeah, Shanice and Simon are both actors from Singapore, and Andrea and Nathan are both actors from Calgary. And in case you made it all the way to the end without realizing that Andrea and Nathan were plants, they do this beautifully choreographed dance number, and that's the kind of final moment before the curtain called, okay, there's no way these are plants. This is way too well choreographed.
See, I would have loved it if they didn't dance at the end. I left thinking they were not plants.
I think I liked the dance number. I think there has to be a moment where you don't just let the audience, you kind of have to give up the game at some point.
No, I would have kept the game going. Let the audience leave and then read the program and find out they were plants. Because I was full on ready to leave going, okay, that actually was the show. It's a heavy improv audience interaction show, and this actress was really good and just ran with a punch of, well, a woman is trying to leave and she is doing everything in her power to hold her put.
Yeah, I don't know. I loved the way that they kept it going as a surprise until finally, okay, here's what's really happening. We are going on tour. These actors are actors. Moving on. Yeah. Anyway, this is, okay, we are going way too long on this one, but this show, there's no way to talk about this show without just heaping praise and unpacking every little detail.
It was so good. It was a great patron pick by the end of the run.
Yes.
Bravo to them.
Well deserved.
Yes. All right. Spoiler button down. On to the next one, which, Ron, I apologize, I'm going to butcher this
Why
name.
don't I say it?
You say it, yes.
Emo Majok, African Aussie. Emo Majok, he is a stand-up comedian. That's just his name, is the name of the show. And African Aussie is the subtitle. So this one's just a stand-up show.
Okay.
I talked about a few shows in our last episode that were about stand-up comedians, one of which was even framed like a stand-up show, but this isn't there's no fiction or mimesis here. This is just come to Fringe and see a stand-up performer. And that's something that I often try to do at Fringe. There usually is at least one stand-up comedian. Often Fringe is a space where stand-up comedians can try maybe more experimental things that wouldn't necessarily land at the clubs they usually perform at. But this was just indeed, it's you get what you pay for. Emo is a very talented stand-up comedian, and he just did an hour of stand-up, and it was really funny. The title is African Aussie. He lives in Australia now. He was actually on Australia's Got Talent, I believe. He made it pretty far in that. But he was born in Sudan, and he actually had to, or I don't actually recall, sorry, no, apologies, Emo, if you're watching this, if he was born in Sudan or his parents were born in Sudan, but there was a civil war there, and his family were refugees. I think they went to Ethiopia next. And then there was a civil war there, and they went to Kenya, and then ultimately they got refugee status in Australia, where he basically grew up. So Yeah, that is his backstory. And there's a lot of like interesting things that he mentions about this, I guess, geopolitical history. He has some comments that he brings up about how he loves seeing how the world is rallying behind Ukraine at this particular moment because, you know, in the context that he came from, like the world certainly did not rally behind anyone in Sudan during their civil war. And so, you know, there's a lot of like an interesting political edge to some of this. But overall, he's just a really likable guy. And he just like, this was probably one of the most chill hours of stand-up I've seen in a long time, where he obviously had prepared material, but a lot of it was just like, yeah, here's just like a funny observational thing from my life. He talked about his kids. He talked about various like relationships he's had. He talks about, you know, obviously being a Black person in Australia is, you know, there's certain, you know, systemic injustices. He talks about runs in with the police, and there's, just like, but he just has this very like calm demeanor, and similar to Mail Ordered, and this is why I put this one here in our running order, heavy on audience participation here. Like he just, you know, built so much of this kind of just like casual improvisation by just asking people in the audience, like, hey, what do you do for a living? And he just like made a joke about like that person's job. And like it was, I imagine the show would have been very different every night. It was also a patron's pick, so clearly it sold well. Yeah. But yeah, he just seems like a nice guy to like grab a beer with, as they say about like politicians. But I think, I was very glad that my entire row, except for me, got called on for some kind of audience participation. I try to avoid participating. I love shows with audience participation, but I try to avoid participating if I can. But as more and more of the audience got picked on, I was like, oh my God, I'm sure everyone in this room will probably have to speak by the end of this. And thankfully I was spared. But he's a really funny guy. I don't know how much more there even is to say about it, but like if you get to see this guy perform, whether at another Fringe festival or just in conventional stand-up venues, he does a great job. And, you know, it's, you know, it would be redundant for me to try to retell some of his jokes to try to explain why they're so funny, because so much of, you know, stand-up and a really good stand-up comedian like him is the attitude that he tells it is so much funnier than any way I could ever try to do justice to it. But yeah, it was a very good time, very funny. Okay. And not much more I can add to that.
All right. Okay. All right. On to mine. So, Third Wheel, a musical by Mad Resilience Films is my next one. And very first off, they gave a program. And basically, what drew me to this particular piece was that I'm a Stephen Sondheim fan, and the description of Third Wheel is basically all about, as it says here, is it better to be the third wheel than no wheel at all? Third Wheel is an original musical exploring the dysfunctional relationship between a trio of adults trapped together for a weekend. Get to know what it's like to be the third wheel in more ways than one. Now, if you know Stephen Sondheim, there is a musical he does that is very similar in concept, which is Company, which explores the life of the 35-year-old bachelor Bobby and his relationship with his married friends. And
you just did an episode about Company, didn't you?
We did. Check it out. It's hanging out up there. So, and the neat concept of this show is that it's a cast of 4 people, but there are 3 characters. Meaning that on any given night or any given performance, it's a different lineup. So at my lineup, I had Isha Babuk. I had Anthony Battatello and Nicole Marie McCafferty were my 3. And basically the premise is, as it describes, 3 adults end up at this place we can. So in this story, it is a family cottage, and you have Anthony, who is playing Camden, and then you have his sister, who is Jenica, and you have Camden's wife, who is Nicole. And basically, Jenica comes up for a peaceful weekend, but as it turns out, her brother and her sister-in-law, who she does not like very much, who are having marital problems, have done a weekend getaway to the cottage as well to try and resolve their marriage. After there's been some unfortunate situations, some infidelities have been had, and so they're trying to repair the marriage. And they've left their son with Gilda's mother. So anyway, so it's basically all what unfolds from there. Now, I love this premise, and the whole thing of why they wrote it this way is basically they wanted to create a show that had universal stories that could be sung and performed by anybody. Didn't have to be male, female, identifying, whatever. Could just be a mix of any performer. And they really wanted to go with that and make a real universal story there. And that concept is very good. Now, we're going to get to another musical in a minute called Killing Time.
In a few minutes.
In a few minutes. And that show had a live orchestra. Small orchestra, but it had an orchestra. And that really helped with the show being live. This show was done to tracks. And the hiccup I found with my particular lineup is when you're writing songs for everybody to sing, one of the things you have to make note of is male, female voices are different. They have different mixes in their voices. And it's sometimes tough to write for different mixes. And sometimes I found some of the cast could not hit the notes right. They're having problem mixing their voice. Like women have a chest and a head voice and are their two main ranges. And there's the mixed voice in the middle where it's that break between head and chest. And sometimes if you get in that range, it's a little bit dicey. And some of the cast just wasn't quite in their perfect range. So the concept was really good, but I want to see this fleshed out some more. It's definitely a middle of the pack show out of my 7. I love the concept. I thought the cast was really well coordinated together, but the story wrapped up very quickly, kind of a little awkwardly, in my opinion. I would have loved it. I would have loved a bit more time. Like the show was 15 minutes. Killing Time was 80 minutes. I would have loved to have seen this show go for 80 minutes. I feel like that extra, 20 minutes or so could have really added on the time that are.
So you're saying it killed too much time? Or
yes.
Didn't kill enough time? Mixing
the
metaphors here?
There just wasn't enough time in this story. There were elements that were brought up in the show that was like, hey, we didn't really set up that.
They didn't have time to kill. There it is.
There you go. But yeah, no, like the concept is really good. And the concept of this show could be sung by anybody is really good. But I think in order to do that concept well, you need a live orchestra who can adjust and work with the actors each night versus trying to make them go into a situation where it's a track that maybe doesn't quite fit their vocal range. Like if, for example, if the orchestra knows, hey, person A is singing this role tonight, they like to sing their key, the song's up a key from what we normally do. Let's do it that way for them, And being able to adjust like that would help back this show some more and give it the needed kind of balance it needed to really support their actors as they're doing this really cool concept of rotating roles at random. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'll say about it. It's a really good concept, and I encourage this team. So Mark Datun, I think is how you say, he is from Budapest. And so he was at Fringe 10 years ago. And so he also wrote the music, the lyrics, and he directed this piece. So he did a lot. And Mark, you did a great job. This concept is really good. Pursue it further because you got something cool here. I want to see this explored and fleshed out more and give your actors that chance to have a live accompanist on stage to really help them ground their voices, because sometimes when you're singing to a track, it can be really tough in many ways. So yeah,
it kind of sounds a lot like the interesting premise about like swapping up the cast. It sounds a lot like the play Everybody by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, where they do a lottery on stage to decide which actors are going to play which characters. And I think maybe what part of what I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this interesting casting premise maybe works better not in a musical because of the way that different musical voices can't necessarily be slotted into certain roles the same way. And that show Everybody isn't a musical. So maybe if you want to get experimental with casting, it maybe also reminds me of the Frankenstein that we reviewed with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, where they, take turns playing the role. Something like that isn't a musical and therefore doesn't have to be technical about who is able to, whose vocal range.
I think it's very doable to do, but once again, the trick to that is you need live accompaniment so the actor, the performers can go to the accompanist, or the accompanist will know them well enough because they've done the rehearsals with them and go, okay, you sing the song this way, so we'll adjust it this way. You sing the song that way, we'll adjust it that way. It's kind of like what Les Mis did, where they sang live on set, just they missed the mark of actually rehearsing with the music director before they got to set. so the music director could plan with the orchestra what the actors were going to do ahead of time. So it wasn't this 12-hour orchestra day where they were trying to match something they didn't know what it was going to be. But once again, I think that's the only thing you need to do to make this work is give them a live orchestra of some kind, and then have each of them sing through the show and have the music director go, okay, you sing it this way, you sing it that way, this is how we're going to do it. Okay. So then no matter which makeup you do, you can just pull your notes and go, got it, you sing it this way, we're going to do it this way.
So I see more of a limitation of budget than of form, I suppose.
Exactly. Okay. And I would say just flesh out the story a bit more. There's good elements in the story, but we need to, refine the story a bit. The ending felt a bit rushed a bit. So I would just say refine the story a bit, add another 20 minutes on, go to the 80, 90-minute mark. You'll have a solid show there. Keep going with this, Mark. You did a really good job. We'd love to see this, come back and see more of it in the future. Cool. So, all right, Ryan, let's get down to your last two. Then we got our big wrap up of the night. We're down to the final three. So the first one we're going to talk about with you is I Carry Your Heart With Me by Egg Theater. Ryan, what is this piece?
Okay, so this
is it a comedy?
It's not a comedy. There's funny moments in it, but it's not a comedy. Okay. It's another solo show. It's written and performed by Michelle Martin and directed by Lina Goldhar-Smith. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So right off the bat, I'll say, why did I want to see this one? Because I think that's part of, I will have a hard time reviewing this without kind of walking you through what excited me about it in the first place.
Okay.
I was really excited about the show for two reasons. First off, the title is a line from, or the title and line from a poem by E.E. Cummings. And anybody who saw my batshit Santa Claus thing from a few years ago knows that I'm a fan of E.E. Cummings.
Was that the one where Santa meets death?
That is the one where Santa meets death, which is a real play written by this very famous poet, and it is quite a trip. So right off the bat, poet I like, title of the play, I'm here for it. Reason number two why I was excited is because I read the description, and it talked about how the main premise of this play is it's about Michelle Martin, our writer and performer, coming to terms with the death of her mother, which happened several decades ago, but how she's processing her grief through her relationship with her mother, mediated by an audio recording that her mother gave, a speech that her mother gave at some kind of oncology conference or summit while she was dying of cancer. And so the thing that perked my interest is I am a very big fan of the American playwright Lucas Hnath. I don't know if you're familiar with him or his work.
I am not.
But lately, a lot of his plays have been experimenting with pre-recorded audio in live theater. And one of his plays in particular, which is actually coming to Crow's Theater next year, is called Dana H., which is about his own mother, told through very experimentally with an audio recording of an interview that was made for the purpose of this play, but an interview she's giving to a journalist friend of the playwright's. And then that audio recording plays in the background of an actor on stage lip-syncing along to it. And it's about the way that, as she's describing this traumatic situation that she found herself in, which is really awful, and I won't spoil that unrelated play in the review for this play, it's about this kind of way that like trauma and grief fractures our identities and disembodies ourselves. Like, maybe we'll review it when it comes to Crows later in this year.
Okay.
But the fact that this is a play about the playwright's relationship to her now deceased mother, told through the medium of a pre-recorded audio, I'm like, that kind of sounds a lot like Dana H. I should really see this. So right off the bat, I lay all that out to be like, I went into this with very, particular but pretty high expectations.
Okay.
I still enjoyed it, but it was very different from what I was expecting. I think the show itself was less about the recording specifically. The recording was used as a prop in the story of Michelle's own relationship to her mom and the grieving process, but unlike Dana H., it wasn't structured around the audio recording itself. Okay. It is still a very strong piece. Michelle is a very good performer. She, holds the whole piece together. I can't say that it was always necessarily riveting. There were maybe a few parts where it did drag a little bit, as these kind of one-person solo shows, let me tell you about my life pieces, often have a tendency to do. But the fact that this I think it's very clear that this play was therapeutic for her to write. In fact, that is made pretty explicit in the text of the piece itself. And I think that's okay. People are often like dickishly down on that kind of thing. And you're like, don't use theater or art just instead of therapy. But I think, this is a story about a transformative experience going through the grieving process. And I don't think the fact that this is, something that she actually had to go through should diminish that in the way that people often have their guns out for work like this. I don't want to tell her that it's wrong for her to process her grief through art. She is an artist first. So you are going to mine your own life material to create art. And the fact that it's not hiding behind a veneer of fiction shouldn't be a demerit against that. Soapboxing a little bit there, but I think people tend to be very dismissive of pieces like this for that reason. Nobody's forcing anybody to watch this if they're not into that kind of thing. You sign a contract when you're like, okay, this is a piece about your deceased mother. You kind of understand that there will be a therapeutic dimension to it. But while the piece itself isn't necessarily about the recording as much as the description maybe would suggest, the recording is still central, and it is an important piece along the journey that it's decades after her mother passed that she finally listened to this recording. And the scene in the play where she, reenacts listening to that recording for the first time, like, it was very impactful. And like, there was a single tear dripping down like her face. And it really did feel like this was the first time she's listening to it. Obviously it's not, because by the time I saw it, she rehearsed the show and had multiple performances already and clearly had to have listened to it to even write the show. But you really felt like you were in that moment of like, wow, I am impacted by how impacted you are, like listening to this. And there are some moments in the play where they do interesting things with the recording, where like she's not quite to the same degree of Dana H, where she lip syncs along for the whole play, but where she's kind of talking along because like she has the text of the speech memorized at this point, but then the recording cuts out and she continues talking, and you as the audience kind of have to wonder, is she saying what the recording has, or is maybe she editorializing and adding her own? So yeah, there was a lot of like interesting stuff going on here. And the last thing I want to say about it is they had this really like big program, single staple, very, very unconventional. Wow. And
that's a beautiful program.
It is, you love your programs. You would love this one. And they have this playlist of all of the songs, and music was a very foundational part of this piece. And there's 3 songs in particular that were woven throughout this piece that I do want to give very quick shout outs to. One of them is that the piece was bookended by Cecilia by Simon and Garfunkel, and her mom's name was Cecile. So this just feels like a very, it's, apropos in that way. Song choice number 2 that I really want to shout out is that there's a scene shortly after she recounts the part that her mom died when she is a teenager, where the song that starts playing is Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J. And she, like this middle-aged woman performing this show, raps along to it. And I thought this is actually interesting. Like, one, the song is on a maternal theme, but it's also using the vehicle of 90s hip hop to show her becoming an angry, rebellious teenager, coping with the fact that her mom died while she was so young. And so like, it just, seeing this middle-aged white woman rap along to this, but also recognizing that it situates us in time and has a maternal theme. There was just like a very well chosen song and very fun. And the last one that I do want to shout out, and then we'll move on to another show, is that she went to York University, and when she
she's a Yorkie.
She's a Yorkie, just like us. And when she talked about, arriving at York, the song that plays in the background is Home for a Rest by Spirit of the West, which anyone who went to York will know why that's funny. And I just felt very in on this inside joke that a lot of the audience probably didn't get, but playing this show in Toronto, that I'm sure she did, have a lot of people in the audience who got a good smirk out of that. So yeah, this was a very enjoyable show, definitely an emotional ringer, and, did a lot of great things with its audio recording, its autobiographical premise, and its music. So well done.
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay. All righty. Ryan, what is your last show before we talk about our final duo show?
The last show before the last show.
Yes.
This show
Back
is called
to the Bar.
Yes, Back to the Bar. I have the program here. It has this funny image of an astronaut drinking a pint. So yeah, this is Side Street Theater is the company. So it was written by Stephen McDonald, directed by Cassidy Sadler, And it was starring a cast of, I believe, 5 actors. I'll get into the actors as I describe the plot. So
Okay.
it's basically Cheers is the setup. That we are set in a bar. It's late at night. It's basically a stage adaptation of the Billy Joel song Piano Man. The usual crowd trickles in. There's even a harmonica.
Norm!
There's even a harmonica ditty during one of the scene transitions that isn't Piano Man, but definitely evokes Piano Man, and you get that. So we have kind of our usual crowd of these barflies. There's the bartender. We have these 2 elderly folks sitting at the bar together doing a crossword puzzle. They're Myrna, played by Elizabeth Friesen, and Charlie, played by John Healy. And they are, just, casually doing this crossword puzzle. And they're both single. Their life has kind of passed them by. They spend all their time at this bar. They had dreams that don't seem to have really materialized. And what Charlie says to Myrna, that is kind of the little pitch here of how they sold this play, this direct quote from the script. What do you say if neither of us are married in the next 38 minutes, we get hitched? So that's basically the inciting incident, is that this kind of older non-couple sitting at this bar together who clearly enjoy each other's company, decide that they will get married in the next 38 minutes. And that's, so they kind of, there's this interesting dynamic where like they clearly mean it in jest, but they're also committing to the joke and playing it seriously.
Right.
And also at the bar are these 2 younger people who also are not in a relationship with each other. Their names are Matt, played by Patrick Spiegel, and Sarah, played by Karen Skora, who we saw in Bone Cage recently. So they're also, 2 younger people at the bar. They seem to be good friends. The older couple suspects that these 2 are in love with each other, but just haven't figured that out yet for themselves. And the play does something really interesting, whereas while Myrna and Charlie are just kind of, jokingly talking about the marriage that they're going to have, they fabricate the story of how they met as a couple. Like they kind of make up a meet cute to justify this grand romance that is now being consummated through this marriage ceremony that's going to happen. And in describing this made-up circumstance, or the various iterations of this made-up circumstance, the characters, not necessarily the actors, but the characters of Nat and Sarah reenact it as the younger versions of them. And this is done in an interesting, almost Sharon Pollock-esque way of these are the characters playing out a scene that's being imagined by the other characters, but it's done creatively where they are all, the 2 of our main characters and the bartender are all able to see this imaginative situation that you suppose in the actual reality of the world is just being described, but they are envisioning that this younger couple is enacting it for them. It's very neat. I can't say I've ever seen a form of meta-theatricality done specifically this way. Sharon Pollock probably is the closest frame of reference, but even that's not quite right. And then, so that's all very interesting. And it culminates in this sort of adorable, kind of like when kids get married on the playground, where basically the 2 of them stand up and the bartender officiates this marriage. And it's obviously not real, but like, it's just very sweet. And I liked it overall.
Good.
There's, I guess, a big critique I have is that there's a 5th member of the cast who I haven't talked about yet. And that's not because I disliked the actor. I thought the actor, Christopher Sterling, did a very good job. But I hated this character. And his name was Don. And he's, I guess, the 5th or 6th wheel, if you count the bartender as the 5th wheel. But he's just this other young guy who's just so annoying. And I think the play recognizes that he's annoying. I think it thinks that a lot of the comedy of the play is coming from just what a boorish asshole this guy is. But yeah, he just comes in and out of the plot. He makes a big stink. He has to be the center of attention. He's like secret agent Michael Scarn in everybody's improv class. But yeah, like
holding a gun on you.
I really feel like if you had told me that the playwright was the actor playing this character, which he's not, Stephen McDonald is the playwright and Christopher Sterling is the actor, I would have believed that, because it kind of just felt like this is I'm the playwright, I'll be the funny guy in this play. Right. But I hated Don so much. I didn't think any of his jokes were funny. I just groaned anytime he came back on stage. And he's canonically supposed to be annoying, but yes. I don't think my reaction to his annoyingness is the kind of reaction. I think you're supposed to find him charmingly annoying, and I just didn't. And like, he has this whole thing about how he wants to be a spaceman. That's kind of where this imagery comes from of the astronaut. And, you know, it's just, we had a very sweet story about this older couple, you know, using what the version of their lives that they project onto the potential of this younger couple. There was enough there. I kind of just felt like every time Dawn came in, it's disappointing. And I, again, want to stress that it's nothing against the actor. It is just purely, you can have a very good 40-minute version of this play without Dawn, and I think I would have loved that a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's a downer note on this play that I was otherwise very positive on, but
okay.
Let's talk about something we both loved.
Yes, our final one of the night, and it is none other than Killing Time, a game show musical by Mixtape Projects. And I figured out why our friend Arcady was at the show today. It's because Talk is Free Theater sponsored the show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they supported it alongside the Society Creative School, Ontario Arts Council, and Grand Theater also supported it as well. So it had some good backers. But oh my goodness, Ryan.
Yeah, so I just talked a lot. You do get us started on this one, and then I'll chime in.
So basically, the show kicks off as you're at the second, like a number 2 daytime game show, and you get to meet the stage managing team, and their host Sloan Sherman is running late, and that is making everybody very anxious. We have our dancing showgirl who is there as well. Lexi, I think her name was
Alexa Albert.
Alexa, Thank you.
Yeah, all their names are alliterative, which is funny.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then you get these 2 contestants, Emma and Simon.
Sean.
Sean. Thank you, Sean. And so we have the 2 of them, and then Sloan shows up. And the game show gets off to a rip-roaring start, and the lights go out, and Sloan is shot. Dead. And he dies, and they call in the police, and the police come in and investigate, and then it all just spirals out from there. And it is so wonderfully soap opera over dramatic. Like I will preface everything by saying they have a very clear tone they are going with for this show, which is melodramatic. It is not meant to be played for naturalism. No. So people are feigning very big gasps. The characters are very broadly drawn, and oh my goodness, does this show not kill you? Like, I want to see this show done as a movie musical. I could see this totally working on film as a movie musical show.
Sure.
Like, it's 80 minutes, add another 10 minutes, and you get a perfect 90-minute movie. It's a consolidated cast of 8 people. It's easy to do. And Mervish, like I said last year with the Great Comet show,
Great Comet. Wait, you mean Crack of Doom, right?
Crack of Doom, sorry. Crack of Doom. Thank you.
Like, Great Comet's a different show.
Yes. No, Crack of Doom, though, that was last year. That I'm like, Mervish, I'm surprised Mervish and Sharp do not send representatives to these festivals to pick up shows that they want to remount. Because I could easily see this show, Killing Time, done at the Studio Theater at Stratford. And I can even see it being done at, like, the Royal Alex or the CAA Theater. Like,
R.I.P. CAA.
R.I.P. But it's one of those great shows where I'm like, this is so good. Mm-hmm. And I had the best time. I gotta say, Sean was my favorite character.
Shout out to Stephen Howe. Sean. We love Sean.
He has probably one of the funniest interrogation song numbers ever. And
See, I am mad about that because I've been listening to the cast album, which they recorded a cast album, but they did not have the Sean solo song when he's being interrogated on
the
there.
finale for us that they said some songs from the show
I know
are available. But I'm like, you should just have a full cast album.
But I know because I missed the Sean song. Like I have been listening to this album on repeat since watching the show. It's so good. The music is great. All of the performers are great. Like we would be here for a while if we shouted all of you out, but my God. The cast they've assembled for this, our music and lyrics by Ben Kopp. The book is by Margot Grieve, who's also the director. Yes. This is it's mixtape projects. They've workshopped this before. I know they've had other productions of it already, but and that's I think a big part of how people knew to come to see this and why it sold out and also became a patron's pick at its venue. Yeah. But yeah, like this rightfully so. Like we could rave on and on about this, but I will say that. It's funny that it's described as a game show musical because if we're thinking about the genres of this show, it is first and foremost a whodunit musical, and I wouldn't say that game show is a genre description. It's a setting description. The game show is the setting. So, yes. I
mean, one review here that I'm reading on their press release says, it's like Clue meets Family Feud with singing and dancing, and wow, can this cast do both? Yeah, I'm like that's perfect because the game show is the setting, it's the backdrop.
I know the show,
but it's not as influential.
The game show is called Killing Time, and we never actually find out what the game of Killing Time is. It's not about their rival game show. The number one game show is Are You Smarter Than My Grandma? And you could kind of surmise how that show works. But yeah, we have no idea what Killing Time, the game show, actually is, and you don't need to. It's not about the game show. It is just this amazing, arch melodrama whodunit musical. We have a classy lady detective and a himbo police officer on the case, and
it's funny in his short shorts,
and a hilarious cast of suspects, all with their own personal quirks and motives. Yes. It's such a well-written Agatha Christie-esque type mystery.
It's got a false ending and everything. It's brilliant.
And I was genuinely thrown in a good way by the plot twist ending, not because I was expecting there to be a plot twist, but not that one. And I think. And I think it's probably something that people could have predicted. The fact that I was surprised probably wasn't everybody's experience, just based on various types of clues.
I had some suspicions about who it was going to be because I'm like, that person is too obscure as a character to not.
Well, we're getting spoily, and this show will have an afterlife, so let's stop.
That's
talking
all
about
I will
the murder myth. But yeah, there's definitely reasons to suspect, but at the end of the day, it's such a fun time. It's not even really about the mystery, even though the mystery is what drives the plot. Yes. Oh my God. Every character was so well performed and so well written. They all had such interesting arcs. I could rave on and on. I hope, if this show does have an afterlife and it's in Toronto again, I will rush out to see it again.
I mean, I just gotta say, they gotta get, Stratford, Mervish, Shaw, somebody has to snap the show up and give it new life. Or you know what? Tour it through the States and do a come from away situation where some US producer will pick it up and then, it just balloons from there. Because this show could work on Broadway. I could see it up the budget. You could add it. You could add a bigger ensemble with more. Of
we don't need more ensemble. I think the cast size is perfect how it is. Yeah. If it's a mystery with too many suspects, it would start getting a little. Yeah. We have a great detective duo. If we start bringing in 30 of them, then it'll I don't know. Maybe you could have a chorus of some kind. But
I'm thinking more just a studio audience chorus or something like that, where if you need to expand the ensemble out a bit, you can, but they get dismissed rather quickly from the story where it's okay, you guys obviously didn't do it, get out. Something funny like that where they totally kill off the big ensemble when they don't need them. But it's just so good.
I just also think
bring
there's
the show back for more. I want more.
And there's something to be said about just a small cast musical. You loved the Exorcist show that just had one person operetta. Now you said you would have maybe liked to see a version of it with a larger cast, but I feel like if we keep insisting that musicals have to have a big ensemble, then only big companies can produce them, have the logistics to even be able to produce them. And it doesn't
have to be huge. I'm not thinking 30 people. Even go from 5 to 10 just to fill out your cast a bit more to give it a bigger sound. It doesn't have to be huge.
In addition to having an afterlife in large theaters like Mervish, even Broadway, this to me feels like, and I don't say this as an insult, but this feels like this could be a community theater staple in the best possible way. And the small cast allows that to be the case, that you don't need big budget.
Would be a good home for this.
Yes, of course. And yeah, I do think like, smaller houses with smaller casts really suits it well, even if it feels like you could sell out big houses with this show because of just how amazing it is.
Yeah.
Whew.
So, it's so good though.
It's so good.
I actually just downloaded before we started. I did download the Killing Time game show album, so I can listen to it on my walk to work tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I have been listening to it all week. It is so good. It's not all of the same cast on that, because that's an original cast recording from an earlier, I think, workshop production. But some of the actors are the same. Yeah.
I love it. I love it though. Like, it was just so good. Like I just want to see it have new life in any way possible. This show deserves, like Crack of Doom last season, deserves to have its life grow and continue, because those were both fantastic, smaller ensemble shows that can be done regionally on a big stage, wherever you can do this. It's really good. And I mean, I just really want to see it go on, because it's got life, it's got legs, and we need new Canadian musicals breaking through. Like we've had Anna Green Gables, we've had Drowsy Chaperone, we've had Evil Dead, we've had
Come From Away,
which was kind of the last big one. But it's like, we need, like, Canadian artists who write these beautiful shows need to have more life brought to them. So I wish more theater companies came to these local fringe shows and things like that to try and find new material that they can produce. Like, I'm hoping Talk is Free brings it to their next season, because this would be a perfect show to bring to Barrie. Audiences would kill it. They would love it.
Kill it.
Haha! But there you go. Like, it's just so good. Like, just give these shows more life. That's one thing I'll say coming out of Fringe, both this year and last year, is there's a plethora of goods. And doing the Fringe circuits is great, but there are some shows that deserve to go to that really big next level of regional theaters across Canada. And Talk is Free has a great program that they have a great new archive library that will have Canadian works like Killing Time can be put into them, so other theater companies can find them.
Yeah.
But people need to know about this endeavor so they can go and find
it's sold out, I think, pretty much every show and got patrons picked. So thankfully people do know about it, and let's just get a larger reach beyond Toronto.
Give it a larger reach. It deserves it. But there we go. All right, Ryan.
30 shows.
We made it through. 30 shows, Fringe Roundup. 2 episodes. It's done. We thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're taking next week off so we can properly rest up after such a thrilling 2-week, really now, it'd be 4 weeks for Ryan, 3 weeks for me doing all Fringe and all editing and getting these videos out. So we have taken a dark week next week, but we'll be back with more content for you. But we thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was such a great time doing the Fringe Roundup. And I know Ryan was a glutton for this season. I hope he didn't burn himself out too much.
I had a moment where I'm like, I'm seeing too many shows. I'm not getting my work done. But no, it was, Fringe is my Christmas. And 12 days of Christmas. And it was great. I was so glad. Thank you, Fringe, for approving our press pass to allow us to see as many things as we did this year. Thank you to all of the artists
for approving us to come.
Yes. Thank you to all of the artists for confirming that they are okay with this post-festival coverage, especially the ones who aren't going on tour, who don't necessarily have a material benefit to this. But we were so happy to see all these. Congratulations to all the artists. Shout out to the volunteers, the people who keep Fringe running. We didn't review The Family Crow because we have a whole hour-long episode on that. So check that out if you wanted to hear our thoughts on The Family Crow. Whew, I'm wired, but Fringe does that. And I'm looking forward to next year.
Yes, hopefully Jill will be back for next year. She was missed. But she was just being a very good artist in her own right.
We might have had to do 3 episodes if we had somebody else seeing even more show.
True. Very true. Very true. Who knows? Maybe next year we'll do like a whole Fringe panel where we get all our friends who have seen Fringe shows to come and join us for videos. Who knows? We'll have
to be determined.
To be determined. But if you, as we said, if we didn't get to your show and you want to still reach out and have us interview you or do something with you, please reach out to us.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you. We will talk to you. Email us at the link below. We will absolutely find something we can do to support art enthusiasm that you have brought to the city. So there we go. Ryan, give us that classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off we all know and love.
It's not the same classic one because, as I said with last time in last year's Fringe, I guess I said some contentious things on here, so if anybody wants to,
Did you?
maybe some. If anybody does want to reach out to me personally, to talk about any of the things I said on here, feel free. You can, DM me on Instagram as Ryan Borochovitz, all one word, spelled the way my name is spelled. I don't use Instagram much, but I'm glad to put that there if anybody does want to continue these discussions after, so you don't have to be mad at us in the comment section. How about you, Mac?
Follow me at Mackenzie on all social media platforms. By the time this part 2 comes out, we will have released our first episode of season 5 of my other podcast, Before the Downbeating Musical Podcast, where we talked all about a chorus line. And we will be getting ready to release our second episode. So head over there to find out all the clues and the promos, and you'll be getting a look into episode 2, which I will say features some gangsters, some craps, and a escape to Havana. Wonder what the show could be. If Ryan were only a bell, he could figure it out.
Hey. Anywho.
Anyway, there we go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all after our little brief hiatus, and we will see you in the next episode. All right. Bye. Cheers, my friends.
Cheers to Fringe.
We are out for another year. See you next year, friends.